Good morning. How are you? We are a hilarious church. Apparently the Patriots game is waning heavy. Welcome. If you're here with us, if you're guest this extra special, welcome to you. Okay, I got this fun story to tell that has all kinds of nuances, and yet at the end it serves a purpose. So after the 11 o'clock service last week, I was standing around over there somewhere talking to a couple that hangs out around here as part of the Narrate crew, and they're a young couple who have a couple young kids, just had a new kid, and they're cloth diaper people, which they get a gold star for that, Anyway, that becomes relevant in a second, because they were sharing how their wash machine broke, and if you're a cloth diaper person and your wash machine breaks, I'm not a genius, but I know that gets a little dicey quick. And so they're sharing how their wash machine is broken, and like so many people right now, like they don't have money coming out their ears and not quite sure how they're going to figure out how to get that thing replaced, and contemplating disposable diapers and all of that stuff. And as they're talking about how their wash machine is broken, I'm thinking, oh, well, I think I know where there's a wash machine they can have, because about a month ago we moved some friends into a house, and there was a washer and dryer in that house, and they already owned a washer and dryer, so we moved the one that was in there out and put it in their garage and put theirs in there. All the people moving going, why don't you just keep the ones that are already there? But you know how that goes. And so we put this one in the garage, and they said, well, if you know anybody who needs a washer and dryer, holler. So as this gal is sharing this story, I turn and I kind of look this way, and there's my friend Jonathan, who's tearing down the video stuff, and I said to him, I think I know where we can get a washer. And he said, I think I know where we can get a washer too. And so I'm saying to them, I think I know where I can get a washer. And then I turn and I look, and there's the guy whose washer it is. And I said, hey, Chris, still got that washer? Yep. Still want to give it away? Or still want to get rid of it? Yep. Do you want to give it away or sell it? I want to give it away. Okay, so I turn and I look at this couple, and I said, well, look at, there's a washer. Need a washer? Yeah, we'll take a washer. And then I said, do you have a truck? No, don't have a truck. And you could kind of see them scratching their head like, oh, geez, don't have a truck. He said, I wonder if I can fit it in the Forester. I'm going, no, don't want to do that. And so I'm thinking to myself, tomorrow's Monday, it's my day off, my friend Kyle will be back in town, that'll give us something to do with the boys. And then Sarah, who had kind of sauntered up and sat down during this conversation, Sarah's on staff here as well, and she said, well, we'll deliver the washer. And I was like, well, I'll deliver it. She said, no. And here's a classic wife moment. Then she said, Tom will deliver it on Wednesday. And I said, well, no, really, I wouldn't mind doing that tomorrow. And she said, no, Tom will do it on Wednesday. What's even funnier about that is the washer was broken, the dryer worked, and so they talked them into taking the whole set. So they bring over this new washer and this new dryer, and they replace the washer and the dryer, and then their phone rings later that night, and the gal is saying, hey, thanks for the washer, but now our dryer's broken. The dryer you gave us doesn't work. And oh, geez. So they redid all the work, and Tom and this high school student, Caleb, they show up again on Friday or something with the new dryer, and they take their old dryer and they replace it with the dryer. This is really confusing, isn't it? They replace it with the dryer that they had originally put in there. It's ridiculous. And they switch it out, and still nothing. Doesn't work. So they checked the breaker box, and the breaker was blown. So then she's like, well, we want the matching set. So they switched it one more time. Now, what's fun and hilarious about that is since early December, we've been talking about rolling out this idea this week that we simply wanted to call Narrate Classifieds. And that story essentially captures everything that we hope to accomplish with Narrate Classifieds, where we recognize that we're a people of stuff and lots of stuff, and we even have storage units to store our stuff that we don't use or that we've got 3 of. And so we thought, it'd be fun to have this means for people to say, hey, I've got an extra washer and dryer, just bought a new house. If anybody needs a washer and dryer, give me a call. So we're going to do that. On the back part of the Narrate News, which is the piece of paper that you get as you walk in or walk out that kind of tells what's going on around here, starting next week, there will be this Narrate Classified section. And we'd like to be the middleman as little as possible, but essentially it's your opportunity to go, hey, I've got this truck. I'd like to give it away. And you put it in there, and someone will take it, I assure you. And at the same time, one of the questions is, so can we sell stuff? And the answer is yes. Of course you can sell stuff. Obviously, we're not looking for you to make this a business venture. Although if you want to sponsor it, we might let you do that. That'd be kind of funny. So we're just going to let it become a monster, and if it becomes too big of a monster, we'll dial it in after that, but we're learning to not overmanage at the beginning. So there you go. You can use that to be blessed or be a blessing, or we'll keep that in front of you for the coming weeks. But bam, isn't that cool? Fun story, huh? I came home from tearing down that morning, and I said to Teresa, I love the church. And she's like, eh? And I was like, not Narrate. I love God's idea of the church, that people will just be taken care of by the nature of being in community together and kind of spreading stuff around. That, it's so cool. So cool that this young couple was able to get a washer, and now they can wash their diapers. She was telling me that the alternative is you clip them to the edge of the toilet bowl and you flush the toilet. Just doesn't sound very good, does it? Bless their hearts, because the landfills have less diapers in them because of them. I contributed heavily to the landfills in my day of having kids. Okay, so we're gonna start this conversation, this series this morning that we're calling God Who. Not Whoville, God Who, as in there's these things that happen in the Hebrew Bible that we're going to talk about. In a nutshell, which is kind of an interesting statement, isn't it? I was thinking about that this week, and I found myself saying, in a nutshell? Where does that come from? In a nutshell. Hey, honey, where's the bill? Oh, I stored it in the nutshell. What is it? I'm going to save this Christmas money for a rainy day. Where am I going to put it? I think I'll put it in a nutshell. What is that? Someone needs to do a study and figure out where that statement came from. In a nutshell. Definitely couldn't use that statement around high school students very often, because it would get dicey fast. But around mature people like all of us, we can use it all we want. So in a nutshell, yeah, because we're a clean, holy bunch. I'm losing you faster and faster as things roll on. In a nutshell, here's what we're going to do. Is in the Hebrew Bible, there's this crazy thing that happens where God keeps giving himself new names. It's not that he's schizophrenic. It's not that he's a plurality of beings in the sense of polytheism, but there's these things that happen, and God seems to capture these events by giving people, sometimes people give him a new name. Kind of like when you might say to somebody, you don't know that side of me. Or probably in a less courageous way, you say, oh, you don't know that side of them. Right? It can be good, it can be bad. I was having dinner with some friends last week, and the wife said, oh, you don't know that side of my husband. And she wasn't speaking in the negative, which we could all do that as well about one another, but she's saying, you don't know the gregarious, outgoing, funny, hilarious guy who likes to act and has formerly blown his eyebrows off with gunpowder. You don't know that side of my husband. That's what kind of happens with God in the Hebrew Bible. Throughout the Hebrew Bible is there's this stuff that happens, and God captures it in the form of a new name. And so starting next week, especially, we're going to grab these specific instances, and really what it is it's an opportunity to do some character of God type of analysis and just spend a little bit more energy understanding who God was, particularly as revealed in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament. This morning, though, what I want to spend some time shining some light on, and I think it gets a little crazy, but I think in the end it is quite relevant, is there's this one observation that's simply this. I think we have a slide. That oftentimes it was new challenges, new experiences, new obstacles that led to God being given a new name. You can't say that's exclusively true. But oftentimes what led to God giving people, or people giving God a new name, was that they experienced life in a way they had never before experienced life, and thus they experienced God in a way they'd never experienced God. A couple examples, just to show you. Exodus 15. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. They traveled in the desert for 3 days without finding water. I've been to the desert of Shur. Wait, I think I've been to the desert of sin, not the desert of Shur. It's not a joke. There's actually a desert of sin in Israel. To go an hour without your water bottle, I can't imagine. 3 days, definitely can't imagine. When they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter, so they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Deep, profound theological exegesis right there. And then the people complained and turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. Today in the world, some of the best water purifiers actually utilize this type of wood. Totally. Sorry, I couldn't even say that with a straight face. I have no idea what kind of wood that is, but nonetheless, God did something crazy. It was there at Marah that the Lord set before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. He said, if you'll listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight. There's all these snickers up here. It's kind of a goofy No, that's good. I like laughter because I'm not funny. So if you laugh, it makes me feel better about myself. If you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the diseases I sent on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Now, Our Bibles translate that, I am the Lord who heals you. There's actually two Hebrew words there, and they're simply this, Yahweh Raphi, or Yahweh Rapha is how you pronounce that. So there's this instance, there's this incident, there's this challenge that happens, and God captures it by going, okay, from now on, call me Yahweh Rapha. Another instance where, and that's one of the tragedies of English translation, is we miss a lot of these because the Bible makes it easier by just ridding them from the text. Exodus 17, there's another such instance. While the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Moses commanded Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek for us. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill, holding the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed to the top of the nearby hill. Now, with all due respect to God and Moses, there's kind of a funny thing going on here. It's like, hey, you guys go fight. You might die. Like, you head down into that valley. You go swing your sword. Like, you go fight. We'll be up here on this hill, and we'll be praying. It's kind of what's happening, right? Which, it's a deeper spiritual exercise. I realize that, but it is kind of funny. Like, you guys go down there. We'll be up here. Last week, someone walked in while we were setting up, and I was drinking my cup of coffee, and he said, everyone's working but the pastor. I was like, you're such a jerk. Where am I? As long as Moses held up the staff in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. Now, if you let yourself be sarcastic, this gets funny too. But whenever he dropped his hand, the Amalekites gained the advantage. Moses' arm soon became tired, so he could no longer hold them up. So they're fighting, they're dying, they're fighting for their lives, they're fighting for their wives, they're fighting for their kids. And Moses is going, oh, this is a lot of work. I don't know if I can keep this up. Sorry, it's maybe sacrilegious, but I think it's pretty funny. Moses' arms soon became tired, so Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. Then they stood on each side of Moses, holding up his hands, so his hands held steady until sunset. As a result, Joshua overwhelmed the army of Amalek in battle. After the victory, the Lord instructed Moses, write this down on a scroll as a permanent reminder and read it aloud to Joshua. I will erase the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar there and named it Yahweh Nasi. It's actually pronounced Nes. Yahweh Nes, which means the Lord is my banner. So this is the type of stuff we're going to be looking at. There's these times where God gives himself a new name. This morning, there's a pattern, though, that for me just popped off the pages in the last couple of months as I've been spending time in this in my own time in the text, that there's this pattern that I think can speak quite profoundly into our lives if we'll let it. The pattern is this, and the pattern leads up to God giving a new name. People experience life in a way they've never before experienced life. They're given challenges that they've never before been given. That they're given obstacles that they have no grid for predicting what the outcome will be. You get that? Like, the first thing that happens is people actually experience life and challenges and obstacles in ways they never have before. Complete paradigm shift. No way of predicting outcomes. That typically is followed by God showing up in a way that they couldn't have predicted because they hadn't seen God show up like that before. You experience this in your own life, right? Like, a step of faith is asking God to show up in a way that you don't even have a box for explaining how he could show up in that way. So they experience a challenge they've never experienced before. God shows up in a way he's never shown up to them before, and the result is they have an understanding of who God is and what he's like in a way that surpasses what they knew before that. Like, their understanding of God and his dreams for the world is shattered. It grows. It's expanded upon. Now, if you consider yourself a spiritual person, if you consider yourself a Christ follower, chances are if you're here, there's a desire in your heart to grow spiritually. And it's that, I think that pattern is quite important to us in our culture. Because what I want us to see ultimately, here's the one thing I'm going to shine some light on and kind of in a variety of ways, is it was new experiences that ultimately helped them to come to know God and know him better. It was experiencing life and challenges and obstacles in ways they never had before that led to spiritual growth. And I would suggest to you that comes in contrast to the way we default in our culture. And that's when we talk about spiritual growth, we talk about this, don't we? Bible study. We equate spiritual growth with spiritual knowledge. It's why in our heads the most spiritual people are the people who go to seminary. It's why in our heads the people who are the most spiritual are the ones who read their Bibles the most, right? Like, we equate growing in God with studying the Bible. Now, I need to be careful because I'm a big fan of studying the Bible. I think it's central to growing in your relationship with God. I love to study. I love to read. I love to wrestle with the text. My alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning on most days to get up and spend time in the text before I go to work. So I'm not undermining the place of the Holy Spirit's role of illuminating God and his character in the text. But there is some irony, I would suggest to you. Because when we say I want to grow spiritually, and we start studying, and we study and we study and we study, aren't we ultimately studying stories, narratives about people who experienced God in profound ways by the way they lived? So there's a little bit of irony in the whole Bible study phenomenon, because we're trying to learn about God by doing something that's passive and intellectual, and yet the whole time we're studying narratives about people who grew in their relationship with God, not by sitting in a classroom, not by sitting behind a desk, not by going off to school, but by living boldly, courageously, in ways that brought tremendous risk and required them to have tremendous faith. You with me? It's kind of a weird phenomenon. And I would suggest to you that in the church today, we have epidemic problems with overemphasizing the place of study and underemphasizing the place of experience and risk and actually doing something. It's why my prayer to God almost every day is, Lord, this whole experiment is, could a church exist and exist well and thrive that said, we're going to give one day a week to study. And we're going to challenge ourselves to matter in organic and very intentional ways the other 6. It's why we talk a lot about we're not just trying to be another church, nor are we trying to be the only church or the best church. There's a very certain kind of church, and it's a church that tries to embrace this tension, I think. This is, wait a minute, you want to get to know God better? Go do something. Go serve him. Go take some risks. Why is it that to be a professional engineer, to get your PE, if you're an engineer, you don't get to go to school and graduate and then take a test? They require you to enter into the field, to get your hands and your feet dirty, if you will. To be a doctor, you don't get to go to school and study a whole bunch. I mean, you do that, but they require a residency, right? They require you to actually do it. To be a journeyman electrician or plumber or carpenter, to do just about anything you could name in our culture, you don't just get to pontificate about it and talk wisely and eloquently about it. You actually have to go demonstrate that you can do it, right? Why then are we willing to allow people, ourselves, to claim to be spiritual giants when all we've done is study? Now I recognize I'm on thin ice here. I'm 31 years old. So, right, like me and many of my friends, I'm in some ways speaking against myself. Right, because if someone comes up to you and wants to give you marriage advice and you find out they're not married, you punch them in the nose. Right? And if someone starts telling you how to be a good parent and you learn they're not a parent, you punch them somewhere. Right? Because it's hard. Why then are we willing to allow ourselves to claim that we know God simply through the intellect? Well, it's why, for me, people will say, what type of people, what's your target audience is the technical term. I go, people. We don't have a target audience. But most definitely, we're not endeavoring to be a next-gen church. Most definitely, we're not trying to be a 20-something or 30-something church. It's why one of the things that brings me the most joy of what God's happening here is to see the 40 and 50 and 60-something people trafficking with us. Recognizing that that's awesome. There's many of you, though. It's really awesome. So I suppose ultimately the question that I'm posing to you is, do you find yourself gravitating towards knowing God purely through the intellect? You could ask it this way: do you place an incredible amount of value on new experiences? What value do you place on new experiences? Scientists will tell us that experiences are actually quite invaluable, that they're extraordinarily valuable. Check this out. You maybe have seen this before, but what do you see? You see a floating triangle, right? Flatter me. Right. But there's no triangle in there, if we want to get technical, correct? There's some Pac-Man shapes, there's some lines, but there is not a triangle in that picture. You with me? Brain researchers, neurosurgeons, people who are studying the brain today, especially guys like Gregory Burns, what they're telling us is this is an example of your brain is limited by its experiences. That you are incapable of seeing something that you're unfamiliar with. That your brain, when it faces a circumstance, when it faces a problem, it's actually quite lazy, it's quite efficient, it's quite green, you might say. It has an extraordinary amount of energy available to it, but it instead chooses to use as little as possible, and that means it uses its context. It uses what it's familiar with. So the reason you see a triangle is because it's what you're familiar with. It's what you know. It's what your brain is guessing, and your brain does that a lot, and it uses past experiences to guess. So scientists will tell us, you want to change your perceptions of what's right and true and beautiful and good? You have to change your experiences. They'll tell us that your perceptions are directly linked to your experiences, which means what? Your perceptions are only as reliable as your experiences. The accuracy of your perceptions is actually quite relative, the scientists will tell us, to your experiences. So what then, if we want to change our understanding of what God is capable of what His will really is, of how He really works in the lives of people? I mean, is there a place for studying the narratives of old? Absolutely. But so too, experience, right? Consider Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey, in 1913, had a very astute baseball mind, graduated from law school in 1913, having put himself through law school by coaching a baseball team. When he graduated from law school, Branch Rickey decided that rather than continue in law, he wanted to let baseball win the day, and so he pursued a career in professional baseball, not to play, but just to be involved. He was hired by the St. Louis Browns. You've never heard of them. That's because they went under shortly after he was hired. And thus, he went to work for the St. Louis Cardinals, the best baseball franchise. And so St. Louis Cardinals hired him as their field manager. While being the field manager for the St. Louis Cardinals, Branch Rickey invented things like the batting tee and the sliding box, both staples of the game of baseball today. In 1921, the management had so recognized Branch Rickey's talents and abilities and just wisdom in the game of baseball, they hired him as their general manager. Now, a general manager of a sports team, their general commission is they find the players and the coaches. Players play, coaches coach. General managers find them so that the team wins. And in the 1920s and 30s, while the general manager for the St. Louis Cardinals, Branch Rickey invented something called minor league baseball. Part of the challenge of being a general manager is finding new talent. Part of the challenge of finding new talent is you're competing with everybody else who wants new talent. It was Branch Rickey who said, this is ridiculous. We should own several players, the rights to several players, and then we should own several teams, and we'll develop them in our own systems. So the Helena Brewers are an innovation, the result of Branch Rickey's innovation, because he went, let's start farm teams. Minor league baseball is what we call it today. In the 1940, Branch and the owner of the Cardinals had a falling out, and much to the dismay of historical Cardinal fans everywhere, he was fired. Subsequently, the Brooklyn Dodgers hired him in 1941 to be their general manager, and from 1941 to 1944, Branch Rickey successfully throttled, caused the results of the Brooklyn Dodgers organization to go downhill very quickly. By 1944, they were kind of the doormat of the league. Fans were calling for his head. The media was calling for his head. He was arguing that he was trying really hard. But they didn't care. They wanted him to win. Now, Branch's perspective was the problem was the war was going on. And at this time, in his understanding of things, to win the World Series, it was kind of like playing the lottery because you could find all the talent you wanted. The catch was having them get to play a whole season before they got drafted into the Army and ended up in the war. And so Branch Rickey, dealing with that problem, had this idea. There's a whole slew of talent available to us that we've never invited to play with us. African Americans. At this time in American history, African Americans played in the Negro League and whites played in Major League Baseball. And it was Branch Rickey who started going, what if we allowed blacks to play for us, African Americans to play for us, we'd have more talent than we know what to do with. And so he went. It was an unwritten rule in baseball at the time, but very much a rule that was obeyed. He went to the owner, persuaded him to try to buck the system. The owner said, okay. He was given permission to tip a few scouts to start looking for African Americans, and they knew that they needed to start with one, and they knew that this one was not only going to have to be extraordinarily talented, but have a very strong makeup, because they knew that what he was going to endure as the first African American in Major League Baseball was going to be brutal. And in May of 1945, a scout called Branch Rickey and said, I think we found your guy. His name's Jackie Robinson. Guys like Branch will tell us that new experiences have an extraordinary amount of value in changing our perceptions of what's possible and challenging us to experience life and what God is capable of, if you will, in new ways. Consider Nolan Bushnell. In 1970, Nolan Bushnell graduated electrical engineer, and like many electrical engineers, went to work in Silicon Valley. His real passion was gaming, though. Like, at this time, gaming consisted of things that sat in bars and restaurants, and he loved it. He went to work for a company kind of moonlighting, and they invented a game called like Starship and Spacecraft or something like that, and it was just a spacecraft and a UFO, and there was 3 buttons: thrust, shoot, and rotate. And so you put the quarter in, and you were supposed to fight this UFO. Well, what happened was, as it was recorded, like, people would put their quarter in, and at this time you put a quarter in a video game and you watched it. Well, what would happen was the flying saucer would come over and shoot the spacecraft, and the game was over, and men were angry, kicking the machine, saying, "Give me my quarter back." So the company kind of failed. He quit, moved on, started another company with one other man and $500. They decided to call that company Atari. They hired a guy, young, enterprising electrical engineer, and they said, okay, here's what we want you to do. We want you to develop an electronic form of ping pong. People said, what are you doing? No one wants to play a game like on a TV when they can actually play it like in their house. Like, that's ridiculous that people are going to want to do something fake when they could do it in real life. He said, do it. His orders were 2 paddles, a ball, and the score. This guy in a few weeks developed Pong. It's riveting. So what happened? What happened was they were successful. They put this thing in a bar, because this is where people played games in restaurants, places, clubs, places like that. Put it in there. 2 weeks later, the owner called him and said, "Hey, come get your machine. It's broken." Nolan went down there, discovered that it wasn't broken. It was jammed with quarters. Extraordinarily popular. But the problem was, it was such a simple design that all the companies who were in the business stole the design, and Atari just about went bankrupt. And then he said, okay, so what I want us to do is put this thing in a console, and we're going to sell it to people to play in their homes. And the conventional wisdom was, people do not want to play video games at home. They want to hang out with their families, they want to read books, they want to do stuff outside. They don't want to play video games at home. It's a ridiculous idea. He said, do it anyway. They did it successfully, rather quickly. Sears eventually bought exclusive rights to the Pong console, and their very first order was for 150,000 Pong consoles. Guys like Nolan, guys, what people call iconoclasts, people who do things that other people said can't be done, they tell us that new experiences are extraordinarily valuable. And I would suggest to you that the people in here, the people who lived real lives, fought back real fears, took on real dangers, really faced going broke, really faced starving to death, really faced all the fears that come with life, the people of the text, they will tell us the same thing. You want to know God? You want to know Him better? What value do you place upon new experiences? Yeah, God can be known through the text. Absolutely, God can be known in venues like this. But maybe it's appropriate, proportionally appropriate, that 1/7 of what we do as a church is this. Because iconoclasts will tell you, the people of the text will tell you, new experiences are key. Now, I recognize that I'm looking at a bunch of people who have chose to be part of a church plant. So in many ways, I'm looking at the 5% of the population that culture tells us are kind of front edge type people, risk taker type people. And so in many ways, I'm going, good job. And keep on. Like God is experienced in new experiences if the names of God can teach us anything. And as an organization, I want you to know, like as a community, as a church, we're owning some of that pressure with you. One of the things that, well, take the sermon after Thanksgiving weekend where all I did was type. In my estimation, we failed miserably that week. And yet I'm glad we did it. Because it was a reminder to our staff, it was a reminder to this family of people, hey, we're gonna take chances. We're going to do whatever it is we think God's calling us to do. We're going to mix it up a little bit. I think, well, one of the things we've said to all of our team leaders, whether it's ushers or coffee or setting up or AVL, is, hey, volunteering around here goes in 1-year spurts. And every August, we're just going to assume that people are done, that they're going to shift into a new department. And the passion there is the benefit that people will have by experiencing new departments, experiencing new ways of serving, new ways of being involved. Risky, scary, but it's built into the system. I think what's fabulous about our scattering opportunities is they're so random. And we don't have really any control over what they consist of. But the tension, the risk, is that you'll go, I don't mark trees. I don't paint barns. I don't saw logs. At least only at night I saw logs. Like part of what we've built into the system is just these opportunities to be random. Because I think God reveals himself when we experience life in new ways. Psalm 20. Sorry for the lack of text this week, but I assure you it'll be heavy in the coming weeks. But Psalm 20. This is New Living, that's NIV. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. Now, that word trust, both times that word trust is used, it's our Hebrew word zakar. If you were around here for the High Views of God series or the High View series, remember when we talked about a high view of God, we asked this question, why does the text keep saying remember, 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 remember? It's the Hebrew word zakar. You might remember that someday it's going to be tattooed somewhere on my body, if I ever get a tattoo. But this word zakar, it means remember. It speaks to this idea that sometimes we're going to look ahead of us and we're going to go, life doesn't make sense. There's no way God is good and can be trusted. And what God is saying is look behind you and the past will demonstrate that he is. So here, the text says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. To remember the name of the Lord our God is not to remember a Bible study for the psalmist. It's to remember a time where he experienced God in a way he had never experienced him before. So I guess my question for you this week is, what can you do this week to mix it up? Maybe even just to mix it up for mixing it up's sake. Maybe you sleep on the other side of the bed. Get all crazy, you know. Maybe you eat at another end of the table. Maybe you drive a different route to work. Maybe you open the community section and see if there's a place you can serve that you've never served before. Just to kind of mix up your understanding of God and what he's doing and how he reaches people. Like, is there a way of serving that you've never served before, dramatically uncomfortable for you? I don't play with kindergartners. I don't teach kids. Maybe that would be a vivid way for God to show himself afresh and anew to you. I don't say that because we're desperate for teachers. I say that as example. What could you do this week to begin serving God in a new way? I'm going sledding after church today. Whoa, there's a bump right there. I'm going sledding after church today only because I was preaching this sermon this weekend. Because it's the last thing I want to do at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon is go sledding. But you got to practice what you preach. So how could you mix it up? What if your desire to know God afresh and anew is directly related to your willingness to experience life in new ways, new challenges, new obstacles, and allow God to greet you in those times. Let's give you a moment to reflect through prayer in the solitude of your seat. Lord God, to think that we completely understand you is quite ludicrous and kind of sad. God, we recognize that you are almighty and all-powerful, that you reveal yourself to us in the text, but even there in limited fashion. God, I pray that this community, both collectively and individually, that we would not retire and say, okay, we've figured him out, but that we would continue to challenge ourselves to invite you to break into our lives in unique and fresh and paradigm-shifting and uncomfortable ways. God, I pray for people here this morning who are yet contemplating a relationship with you, that there would be some freedom that would enter into their soul as they would understand that following you is not simply regurgitating a bunch of discovered facts, but entering into a dynamic relationship with the God of the universe, made possible by the blood of Jesus, and yet lots to be learned. God, we love you, and we trust you. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.